Welcome again to Coastal Matters. This is a monthly television program produced by the Nantucket Coastal Conservancy in association with Nantucket Community Television. I'm Charlie Walters. My guest today is Peter Brace, who is a Nantucket guide who runs the newly formed business Nantucket Walkabout, but he may be better known to you as an outdoor writer. Over the last 20 years, he's written for any number of publications, including the Nantucket Beacon, the Nantucket Independent, the original Nantucket Magazine, N Magazine, the Nantucket Chronicle, Nantucket Sound Magazine, among others. He's also the author of Nantucket, A Natural History, as well as Walking Nantucket, a walker's guide to exploring Nantucket on foot. Thanks for joining me, Peter.
Thanks for having me, Charlie.
When you go out for a walk on the beach or wherever it happens to be, what are you seeing and appreciating that the rest of us are not seeing and appreciating?
Lately, it's been a lot of taking pictures with my iPhone, which maybe cheapens the trip, but I like to take photos of what I see. And I think I'm seeing the light, the clouds, reflections. I'm looking on the beach for anything I can photograph, what the waves are doing, anything that's way offshore. Of course, I don't have a telephoto lens. It really comes down to repetition. There are places that I go over and over and over again on a weekly or daily basis, just because, not that I want to be bored, but I want to see something new, and you're guaranteed to see that.
Even being in the same place, you don't see the same thing or things every day.
This is one of the things I've been telling my people that I've been taking on hikes out to Smith's Point, is that if you're a geologist that just studies the rocks, from my perspective, I would think I wouldn't be as excited as if I was a coastal geologist, because every day, every week, every month, you can see the area that you're studying change. You can see the beach being reformed. You can go, a great example is Whale Island coming off of the east end of Tuckernuck Island, and that's a sandbar that comes out and kind of forms the lagoon where people can come and land their boats.
Is that an actual island, or
no? But
depends on the time of the year?
It depends on the time of the year, but it's the only part of the island of Tuckernuck that's disputed in terms of ownership, so that the Tuckernuckers tolerate Nantucketers who don't own land on Tuckernuck coming over and landing there and beaching there. But as an example, that thing came out west or east of Tuckernuck and did a dogleg to the north, and that was last year, or that was in 2014. And walking that beach all summer long, all year long, seeing that, and then coming in to 2015 in the spring, coming back and seeing that complete dogleg gone and reformed as an island well south of Tuckernuck.
Sticking with Whale Island for a second, what's the likelihood that Whale Island will eventually connect with Esters?
It's likely. I mean, it has in the past. Smith's Point, what we consider Smith's Point, so people understand, the end of Smith's Point, the half or 1/4 end of Smith's Point, got the name Esters Island when Hurricane Esther in 1961 chopped off that section in Nantucket, and it stayed chopped off, I believe, till 1985, 1986, whenever Hurricane Gloria came along. That Smith's Point, that whole peninsula at one time went all the way across that channel, all the way past the south end of Tuckernuck and almost to the back side, to the southwest side of Muskeget. So it's likely. It depends on how much sand we have. And I'm not a coastal geologist, so I don't know, but the sand gets moved around there all the time.
Well, a long time ago, if you look on maps, they denote the Gravelly Islands. Now, where were they?
The Gravelly Islands were just sort of south of, or were just north. They were sort of just north of that extension of Smith's Point.
So they were between Nantucket and Tuckernuck?
They were between Nantucket and Muskeget.
Oh, all right. Past Tuckernuck?
Yep.
North, past Tuckernuck?
West of Tuckernuck.
Okay. Were they actually gravelly, or were they just sandbars, overgrown sandbars?
Maybe there was a basis of gravel, and that's what people saw, but I'm sure it was mostly covered with sand. And again, I'm not the authoritarian on that, but there was also, and there were names, Adams Island, Jefferson Island, I think. And one of those islands, there was what do they call, a sanatorium. There was a doctor on Nantucket who made the sanatorium so that I believe fishermen or whalers, I'm not entirely sure, coming back to Nantucket with smallpox, they would stick them out there. It was what's the word I'm looking for? Quarantine.
Mm-hmm. Without giving away any secrets, what are your favorite places on the island, either for business purposes or for pleasure?
Favorite places, well, I think anyone who has my email knows that it's Cascada Heaven. So I love Cascada Pond in that area. I love spending time out there in the wintertime, walking in the woods and exploring around the ponds. I spend a considerable amount of time in general in the Quidnet Pulpus or the Quidnet Walwinnet Squam area. I love to walk Squam Road down to Squam Pond, walk along the beach to Quidnet. Sometimes I'll do a loop that goes all the way down to Quidnet from Walwinnet and then back on the beach. And then I started to develop a real affinity for the smooth hummocks area. This summer I discovered a blueberry patch of unbelievable proportions in smooth hummocks.
Oh, now where is that?
Smooth hummocks is between Myacomet Golf Course and the ocean. And I picked probably a gallon of blueberries almost every night in July. And I was posting on my Instagram account and Facebook saying, look what I got. And people were chiming in, oh my God, I've got to find that. And I kept saying smooth hummocks, and nobody knew where smooth hummocks was. I was a little shocked.
Well, how big is it out there? And I don't mean the patch, but smooth hummocks.
The whole area that encompasses smooth hummocks is about 600 acres between Myacomet Pond and what they call Cisco Estates. Cisco Estates are the houses that are, when you get to where the parking lot for Cisco Beach is and you look over and see all those large houses over there, they call that, or I've heard it called Cisco Estates. And so where those end, the east side of that, all the way going to West Myacomet Road, I believe all that's the Moorlands Management District.
Let's go back to Cascada for a minute, because that's an area where you've got the Atlantic Ocean, you've got the harbor, you have the pond connecting to the harbor, you have a real forest, which you don't see in many places on Nantucket. What changes have you seen there in all the years you've been here?
The changes I've seen are first and foremost the cliffs, the bank, the coastal bank that is right there that you see when you get to Cascada, that sort of overlooks the pond and looks back toward town. The erosion of that bank. You go out there, every time I go out there, it's different. There are trees that have tumbled over because it's a clay, a heavy clay base there. There are caverns that are carved by the water breaking on that. So that eroding away is that's the most obvious. But then if you go around Cascada, if you happen to, I like to paddle my kayak to Cascada from Pulpus Harbor on the tide, so that the tide carries me up into Cascada Beach, my kayak, take my lunch, run through the mosquitoes over to the other side, have my lunch, skinny dip, and walk back on the beach trail so that the tide has changed and then I can be carried out. And what I've noticed the most there is the distance between the ocean and the pond has narrowed over the years.
Narrowed or shortened? I mean, is the connector from the pond to the harbor narrower, or
No,
is this a shorter distance from the pond to the harbor?
No, I'm talking about the distance between the east end of the pond and the ocean.
Oh, okay.
The dunes
okay.
have narrowed and worn away. There used to be a substantial dune there that you had to walk over or through to get to the beach, and now it's pretty low and pretty short.
Well, the late Wes Tiffany told me that during the No Name storm, there were actually Atlantic Ocean waves breaking on the pond, at the east
Yeah.
end of the pond. It wasn't just water spilling over the dunes. The waves were actually breaking there.
Yeah.
So I'm sure explains part of what you just said.
And the storms that we had back in 2013, winter of 2012, 2013, we had several nasty nor'easters, not on the same measure as the ones that were in the early 90s, but as strong as they could be compared to those. And I know that narrowed a lot there, and I know that there was a hole between Great Point and well, the Gulls up toward Great Point. There was a slight opening that closed up very quickly. But
Do they still use Christmas trees out around the Gulls? They were doing that at one point a long time ago.
I think that may have been a practice. I really don't know I know the lore of that, and that is that people take trees and dump them out on the edge of the bluff because or whatever bluff.
Lore, not
Yeah.
yeah.
Because the trees act kind of like a snow fence and catch the sand. But I think the Conservation Foundation and the trustees of reservations discourage that practice.
To go from lore to law, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has laws or rules, regulations, whatever, excuse me, governing where the public can walk on a coastline. And I think a lot of people are confused about that. I'm one of them. What does the state say about the public use of the shoreline in the state?
It's the Massachusetts Public Trust Doctrine of I never can get this right, 1660, 1690. I don't know the exact date. And what it says is that the people of the Commonwealth have rights to all coastal areas along the shoreline for fishing, fouling, and navigation. If you're walking along the beach with a fishing pole, you are within your rights to be walking there. If you have a shotgun and you're hunting, whatever you're hunting, a deer, ducks. I guess if it's fouling, it's ducks. Or if you're using your boat in some manner, you're lost, you pull ashore, you need to look around. I don't know the precise definitions, but those three things, fishing, fouling, and navigation. I
And how wide a stretch of land is that the state is governing?
That's basically the low. I think that it's the width of the beach from the water up. In Maine and Massachusetts and Texas, property owners own to the low tide, the low water mark.
To the low water mark.
Yeah.
So
it's you walk
the mean low water mark.
Mean
is
low
what
water
you're
mark,
saying.
yes.
Yeah.
So very stringent, very tight. But we happen to be on Nantucket, and Nantucket, you've probably heard the phrase, there are two types of people in this world, and there's a million things that you can say after that. And well, there are two types of people on Nantucket in regards to beaches. There are people who believe that the beaches here, beach access is their right because they've lived here their entire lives, or they've come here their entire lives, and they've always assumed that they could go anywhere they wanted. And then there are people who believe that beach access is a privilege. And then there are some gray areas. Town property, that is a right. You have a right to be on that property. Private property, we're afforded that privilege. And we are extremely fortunate on Nantucket. Nowhere do we have to pay for parking to go to a beach. We can pretty much go walk on any beach and nobody says anything. We have very gracious property owners all around the island, private, nonprofit, public, that allow access to the beach, and nowhere do you see anybody standing in your way telling you can't go and use that beach. And that is a long-standing tradition that's carried over since humans were first on Nantucket all the way up to now. We've had some clashes. There was the incident with the guy who owns property out on near 40th Pole, but that was worked out, and no vehicles could be parked there, but you could still walk through there. And you'll occasionally see signs, but you'll never feel like I can't walk any further here. And that's not the case for the rest of I know on Martha's Vineyard it's a lot different. Their land bank owns several properties around the island where, yes, you can go to that property and go to that beach, but they monitor how many people are parked there. And when the parking lot fills up, then that's it.
Well, they have a tradition, or rather, we have a tradition that they don't have, because if you're in a plane looking down on Nantucket, you will see tire tracks pretty much everywhere. People take their dune buggies pretty much anywhere they want. But in the vineyard, you don't see that. I guess people actually have rocks all over the place so that you cannot do that on a lot of Martha's Vineyard. Or to go to the West Coast, Malibu Beach is all but walled off from the public.
Martha's Vineyard is 6 towns. Nantucket's 1 town. We're a town, a county, and an island. And for instance, if you live in Edgartown and you want to go to the beach at Chilmark, I believe that you can't go there unless you go with a friend as a guest. And I know that there are homeowners associations along various stretches of beaches that actively guard their beaches from the public using it. And I had a guy explain that to me, because I once wrote a op-ed piece. I was invited to write an op-ed piece for beach access for the Boston Globe. And this guy is a guy who was I believe in the planning office a long time ago for Nantucket. His name is James Langell, and he at one time was the executive director of the land bank on Martha's Vineyard. And he told me Martha's Vineyard has a much higher bozo factor than Nantucket. They're only 7 miles from the mainland. It costs less and takes less time to get to Martha's Vineyard, which means more humanity reaches the vineyard faster than it reached Nantucket, and it's harder to get to Nantucket. It's more expensive. It's a longer trip. So Martha's Vineyard got overrun before Nantucket did. So the people who owned coastal property, took steps before we did, and they have taken a lot of steps that we haven't even taken. We won't hopefully encounter that. Hopefully we'll continue to have everybody welcome everyone else onto their beaches. Otherwise, I think we'll see the ones that are public just completely packed with people more than they are now.
When did you first come to Nantucket, and why did you come here?
I was first brought here by my mother and my mother's friend, Sally. Well, she's known as Sally Reynolds, but people who know her, who are listening now, might know her as Sarah Ward. And she owned property on Squam Road, 108 Squam Road, and that included several horse pastures, which had fences around them, and a horse shelter. And her and my mother were best friends in our town when we were growing up, and in charge of the 4-H. And we had horses, she had horses, so we would bring our horses down onto her property, and we would ride to Great Point and ride in the moors and ride along the beaches. And that was, every June for 4 or 5 years when I was younger. And then I came back during college for 4 years, 86, 87, 88, and 89, to make money for school. And then professionally started here in 1992 with the Nantucket Beacon.
When you walk the shorelines down here, and I'm talking about all the decades you've been here, do you see more pollution, different kind of pollution, more wildlife, less?
Well, I have to understand, during college, I wasn't really paying attention to what was on the beach except, the party. But it seems to me over the time, there's always been beach cleanup efforts. Mm-hmm. Nantucket's beaches are comparatively trash-free. We have the group, the Nantucket Clean Team, which people may have heard of, that cleans a different part of the island every Saturday for most of the year. I guess what I'm seeing now, and it was a trend that I noticed last winter, was lots of dead sea ducks.
Now, would that have been the harshness of last winter?
Harshness of last winter, maybe things to do with climate change. I'm not sure, but I've noticed a lot of dead sea ducks. And over last year, I saw less seals on the beach. I don't know why that is. Usually you see a lot of seals hauling up, and maybe that has to do with where I was walking. But
Were you seeing more seal carcasses? Or
Both.
just both?
Both.
And again, I assume the winter has something to do with that. Last winter was so harsh.
Yeah, but the seals have tons of blubber, and right now, through the beginning of February, the gray seals on Tuckernuck or on Muskeget are giving birth to their pups, as well as mating with the males. And in a couple of weeks after they're born, the mothers abandon their pups, and the pups are out, on their own in the water, feeding themselves. So you frequently see those on the beach.
Tell us about your book, Nantucket, A Natural History, which I believe is unique in the history of Nantucket. A book of that breadth and detail.
Well, there's lots of books that tackle the natural history in bits and pieces. A lot of times in the preview of a book that has to do with the natural world, they'll do a quick overview of it. But yeah, that was an opportunity that came to me by the Egan Maritime Institute, their publishing arm, Mill Hill Press. I think it was maybe Dick Duncan, Jim Lentowski, and somebody else. Maybe it wasn't Jim. 2 or 3 people sort of conspired, hey, let's get Peter Brace to write this book. And I didn't have to think about it. It was a great opportunity to write that.
You were the ideal person to do it. And how long did it take to do it?
They gave me 2 years, and I took an extra year to do it. And so at the end of January 2012, my managing editor person, Dick Duncan, good friend of mine, former president of the Wisconsin Civic Association, he said, you have to stop writing now. I could have kept going. There's so much more.
Yeah.
You get excited when you're writing a book, when you're passionate about the thing that you're writing about, and you want to tell more, and I wanted to do more chapters, and we went back and forth about whether I should have endnotes in the book. And he picked out a thing in the Chicago Manual of Style, which is what the Mill Hill Press followed, that said, a section that said, no, you can't do endnotes in this situation, but I redirected him to the section he should be reading that said, yes, I could. So we sort of, I guess I won that one. And the endnotes ended up being my opportunity to write a little bit longer, be a little bit more technical. They wanted the book so that the average person could pick it up and understand it. And although people have said it's dense, the highly technical stuff is in the back where I can, because that there are people who are going to want to know more. And if they see a number, they can go to the page in the back and get that little bit.
I should also mention you're the environmental writer for the Nantucket Coastal Conservancy. You've attended, I can't imagine how many Conservation Commission meetings you've attended in gathering material.
Yes, and that's just, calling my experience as an environmental writer for the Beacon and then the Nantucket Independent. So, prior to being a part of the Coastal Conservancy, I've attended, I want to say, hundreds of hours of meetings, all for the cause of reporting on the environment here. And though to the average person it seems like, God, I couldn't sit through that. But when you are in that moment and you're listening for the information to tell people the story, and plus I know a lot of the people involved, have known them for a long time, so you can tell what's about to happen or what might be going on by the way he or she is saying something, by an eyebrow that's raised, where people sit in the room, how the board members are reacting. There are all these things that I've kind of, little cues that I've picked up on the ear. You could say, like, playing poker, everyone has a tell, a facial expression, a movement, a gesture, something that tells what they're going to do next, how they're going to play. And, I can say there's places that I'd much rather be at those meetings, but, I've had a lot of experience, so I know how to break them down, usually.
In addition to all the things I mentioned at the top of the show and just now, what are you working on right now? Do you have another book in mind?
I've been working on, for a long time, another hikes book, sort of a second volume of walking the walks, and I was working on that when the Mill Hill Press approached me about doing that book, about doing natural history book. And so I thought originally I was going to try and do them at the same time, which quickly that ended. And I put the walks book aside and finished that book. And then when I finished that book, I slowly got back to work on the second walks book. So now I'm trying to work on that more this winter. And that sort of coincide that. See, when the Independent folded, then I finally had time to do volunteering, and then I had to make some money to survive, so I freelanced a lot, and of course I collected some unemployment. And so I ended up changing my, I guess, the other side of Nantucket is that everybody does, the other side of working on Nantucket, if you don't have one job that is enough for you to live here, then you do a lot of little things to survive here. So I landscaped and dog sat and freelanced a lot. And those things have carried over into this part of my life. So now I'm chairman of the Harbor and Shellfish Advisory Board, and that takes a lot of work.
Tell us a little bit about that before we go.
What do you want to know?
In brief, what is it and what do you have to do?
The Harbor and Shellfish Advisory Board is the advisory board to the Board of Selectmen on all matters shellfish, fishing, and the harbor. So we are not regulatory, we are advisory. So matters that come before us, matters that we believe need attention, we make recommendations to the Board of Selectmen for policy change, for regulation change, bylaw change, and support the Natural Resources Department and support the Harbor Master and Marine Department.
These are elected positions, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, they are.
Yeah. Peter Brace, thank you for joining me.
Thanks
This
for
has been
having me,
very
Charlie.
informative. Hope to have you again.
Great.
For Coastal Matters, I'm Charlie Walters. Thanks for joining us, and please tune in again next time.